Each state has laws that govern them. The purpose of the law is to ensure that all live in harmony. With the law, there is order, and where there is no law, chaos follows. So, if nations who are limited by borders have laws, can we expect the King of the universe to govern his territory without laws? Today, we are discussing God's law. We will discuss each law briefly. I am Nikanda Jai speaking to you. With us is Sister Maria. Welcome to Watchman Ministry, Sister Manga.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Exodus chapter 20, verse 3 to 17 presents to us God's 10 precepts. What is the background of this chapter? Can you give us an overview of what happened prior to what we see at Mount Sinai?
Well, you see, what happened is this. When we read the Bible, we are told in Genesis chapter 12 that when God called Abraham from his native land, he says, come out of among your people and come to a land where I'll have you dwell. So we see God calling Abraham to come out of his native country. And then we see that after some time, Jacob, who was now the son the grandson of Abraham, we realize that he actually traveled to Egypt. And when he reached in Egypt for some time, where his son Jacob was, we realized that they stayed there for a longer period of time. And the older generation died, and we realized that at this point in time, even the Pharaoh that knew the Israelites and what they've done and what Joseph has done have already died. And so the Pharaoh that came into power actually began to mistreat the Israelites. Therefore, we see that at the end of the day, they started crying to God and asking God to help them. And this is where now God brought up, he brought up Moses to lead them out of the land of slavery. And so when they came out of Egypt, we realized that we are told, Israel has lost the true knowledge of God. And so when they came out, when they reached at Mount Sinai, when you read Exodus chapter 19, God introduced himself to them. All along when they came out from Egypt, it was God communicating to Moses. So they have really not seen, manifestation of God's power, apart from the miracles that God, has been doing in their life. They've not heard him speaking to them as what we see in Mount Sinai. So, in other words, they saw the sea parting, they saw how God, inflicted the Egyptians with those 10 plagues, but they have not really heard God speaking to them as he used to speak with Moses. So, by the time when they camped at Mount Sinai, when we read Exodus chapter, 19, we are told that, Moses was asked by God and said, can you go and ask the leaders of Israel? I want to make Israel my special people. And therefore, then Moses went and told the leaders, and they said, well, we accept God's proposal. So you see God proposing to Israel to say, would you be my special people? Just like, a husband to be will propose to a wife and say, would you be my wife? So God was actually proposing and said, would you be my special people? And they said, yes, we'll do. So in verse 20, prior to that, you realize that God instructed Moses to tell them, he said, listen, you go and tell the people to prepare 3 days in advance before I can meet them. So here God is telling his people to prepare. So by the time we reach in chapter 20 of Exodus, they have prepared. Now God is meeting his people. And so we see the mountain is on fire, there's smoke, and God says, tell the people not to draw near. And so this is the background, this is what we see now. So God was getting ready to speak to his people.
Oh, that's interesting. Now let's study and see what each command says. Exodus chapter 20, reading the first and second commandment from verse 3 and 4. Please read it with me. Verse 3 says, you shall have no other gods before me. Verse 4, you shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that which is in the earth beneath, or that which is in the water under the earth. And these are the first and second commandments. What does it mean to not have any other god or to worship the graven image?
All right. You see, Israel had stayed in Egypt for quite a long time, for about 430 years. So this is by the time when they were there, the older generation, as Priya said, they had already died. So they have truly forgotten how to worship God. They were used now to the way that Egypt Egyptian people used to worship God. So here now God was actually telling them, now these are the terms and conditions of the relationship, that you are going to be my special people, and this is how I want us to live. So you should not have any other God before me. So God was forbidding them to have any other idol worship, or to bow down to any of the graven image. So God was actually saying, apart from me, there shouldn't be any other God. I mean, that you should give homage, pay homage, and pay respect. Just like a husband, as I said earlier, just like a husband, when a husband proposes, he expects that wife to commit only to him, right? And the same likewise. So here God was saying, I expect you to commit only to me and not to any other God. So here we are told that, God was telling his people to say, do not bow down to any other, any other God. Do not worship any other idol, because these are not really gods. They are not really God. They are idols in their nature. Yes. So this is exactly what God was trying to tell his people, to say, what we have learned in Egypt, it should be in the past. You and me, these are the terms and conditions of our relationship.
Well answered. Tell me something. Was this the first time that God was introducing his law to Israel? I mean, was it the first time that the law was introduced?
Well, it is not the first time that the law was introduced. Why do we say that? When you look at the Bible answers itself, as we are going to discuss now before we reach that. In verse 8, God uses the word remember. That already gives us a clue to say, why would you remember something that you were not told, or that you had no idea of? So that already signified to us that, this was not the first time that God, spoke his commandment. In other words, the people that existed before Mount Sinai, you realize that they had the knowledge of God's law. And not only that, in chapter 16 of Exodus, remember when he was telling them about the manna and everything, actually God was saying, I want to test you. When they were told to pick the manna, every day they would pick only, that part of the portion that they should eat. And on the preparation day, they were supposed to pick twice. And he was saying, well, I'm doing this to test you if you follow my commandment. So already we could see, before Mount Sinai, that was still in the wilderness, they were, they were introduced to the law. So this time, God is just, telling them and giving them. After all, because we see at the end of the day, they were now given, the hard copy, if you prefer. So now, also another comment that we read from, this is manuscript 1902. It says, this is about Adam and Eve, who was the first man and woman on earth who were created by God. This shows that this also, they had the law of God. It says, Adam and Eve at their creation had the knowledge of the law of God. It was printed on their hearts, and they understood its claim upon them. So already we could see that from the beginning, when Adam and Eve was created, God introduced these laws to them. In fact, also, even in heaven, what led to the fall of Satan, according to Revelation 12, is because it transgressed the law of God. So already we could see that before even Mount Sinai, the law of God already existed. So now it was just a repetition, a reminder of what they had forgotten.
Very well. Let us read verse 7, command number 3. Verse 7 reads as follows. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. How does one profane or use the name of God in vain?
Well, how we transgress or profane or take the name of God in vain? By our words and our actions, right? For example, when we read Leviticus chapter 19, verse 12, it says, and they shall not swear by my name falsely, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am thy God. So, by what we are saying, we may profane the name of the Lord our God, and by our actions, we may profane the name of God. Now, Matthew 15, verse 19, it says, for in vain they worship me, teaching for doctrine the commandments of men. Now, you realize that, for example, many of us call ourselves Christian, right? But our actions, they're actually contrary to what what is the character of God. So, when those who are not Christian, they look at us, they start asking, are these people Christian? Because if they are, look at what they are doing. What they are preaching is contrary to their actions. And no wonder Romans 2:24 says, the name of the Lord is brought to shame among the Gentiles because of you. Why? Because we claim to be Christians, but yet our actions, they contrary to what we are teaching. So in that way, we are taking the name of God in vain by our actions and by what we say, our teachings. It's totally, not in harmony with what we do. So yeah.
Okay, so let us read Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 to 11, and this is the fourth commandment. Verse 8 to 11 reads as follows. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. What do you have to say on that?
Well, you see, the verse introduces us to the God who created the heaven and earth. And we are told that, he created everything in 6 days. Now, going back, this verse brings us to the beginning, which is Genesis chapter 1, where we are told that in the beginning God created the heaven and earth, and then it goes on to specify what he created on what day. So, we have one literal week. It's not prophecy, it's one literal week. So we have one literal week that consists of 7 days, and that week still exists today. We still have the same weekly cycle that consists of 7 days. So we have one literal week that consists of 7 days, and 6 days out of 7 is dedicated to creation. So God creates everything within that 6 days. And then on the 6 days, on the 6th day, God rests. On the 6th day, God finished everything. And on the Sabbath, on the 7th day, which is now the last day of the week, God rests, because everything that was done was completed. So on the 6th day, that is when he created man and animal. So when he was finished with everything, on the 7th day, he didn't have anything to create. And so he rested on that particular day. Now, it's very interesting. One might say, but why did God rest? Did he get tired or anything like that? No, God did not rest because he was tired. So we are told in Isaiah 40 verse 28 that, God is a God who does not get tired. So he rested to set an example for us. So at the end of the day, after he had finished everything, the work that he was doing, on the 7th day he rested. And you realize that Adam was created on the 6th day, and then on the 7th day he rests with his maker. The first ever rest that he gets after from creation. So God was setting an example to us to say, what, out of 7 days of the week, one day you should be dedicating it to resting, to worshiping, to have time and communing with God. So this was the day that God chose. And no wonder when you read Genesis chapter 2, we are told that God blessed it, sanctified. Genesis chapter 2, God blessed it and sanctified it and made it holy, so that all those that rest and follow him as he did, they will have the blessing of these days. Not to say that the other days were not blessed. The other days were blessed, but this day was more blessed compared to the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm. So let us go to commandment number 5, and we're reading from verse 12. And verse 12 reads as follows. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. This commandment tells us to respect mother and father. Is it limited to that?
Well, you see, that commandment tells us to honor our father and mother, and it's not limited to that. Anyone that is older than you, or anyone that is above us, we should be able to respect that. Now, the Bible is using the language of mother and father, because in most cases we look up to our parents. We have respect for them, and God says we should have, of course, respect, because these are the people that brought us on earth, and they are the ones who raises us up. So God is saying you need to respect these people, not only them, but everyone that is that could be of their age, that is elder. And it's very interesting that there's a blessing attached to this commandment. When you look at all the commandments, here there's a blessing of long life. We are told that if you respect your mother and father, then your life will be long in the land that the Lord is giving you. So the opposite is also true. So if you don't actually respect the elders, you don't respect your parents, and your parents, they are not so happy with you all the time. When they talk about you, their heart is saddened, then you can expect things not to go right with you, because God is saying you should have respect for your parents, for the elders. And as they see how much you are making them happy, their blessings will be on you, and you have long life.
Thank you. Now, let us read commandment number 6, 7, and 8 from verse 13, 14, and 15. And it reads as follows. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. One might say, well, for me, I just hurt that person naturally, or I didn't steal a lot. It was just a $10. It is not the same as one who stole 1,000. What does the Bible say to such?
Well, you see, it is us as human beings who tend to, who tend to make comparison and say, I didn't steal that much. It was just a 5 cent or just a $10, so I'm not as much guilty as the other one. And actually, you realize that even our court system today, they talk about the degree of your crime. They are looking at, okay, how serious is your crime? That is how we have categorized sin, if you put it. But to God, whether you stole a $10 or somebody who stole $1,000, you are all considered thieves. Now, the other thing is for somebody who says, I just hate this person naturally, and yeah, without any reason. There are people like that who just say, I just hate it. You know what Christ says? Christ says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 and 22, and also when you read verse 28 and 29. Now, in the case of somebody who is angry with a brother for no cause, Christ says, if you are angry with your brother for no cause, you have what? You've committed murder. That's what Christ says. He expounds on that commandment. Why? Because, why would you be angry with somebody who didn't do anything? So if you had an opportunity to actually kill that person, you would have actually killed that person. And in commenting on adultery, he says, somebody who looks lustfully to a woman, just crossing the street and you're looking and you're drooling over, and you say, wow, yeah, already you've committed adultery. And this is what Christ is saying, that because if you were given the opportunity, you would have actually done the act. So God is looking at the motive. Why are you doing what you are doing? So even if you have not done it in action, but you've thought about it, if you had opportunity, you would have done it. So you're still guilty. And this is actually what God is saying, that you may not have done the act, but you've thought about it, you are guilty. And to act on that aspect, now, not murder per se, but adultery, right? We normally just consider, the action, the physical adultery, but we are also told that, when you worship other gods apart from God, the one that we are reading now, remember no wonder he says that with that first instruction to say you should not have any other god before me. So when you worship other gods, you are actually committing spiritual fornication, spiritual adultery. And this is what we are told in the manuscript 126, 1909. It says, all false worship is spiritual adultery. The second precept, which forbids false worship, is also command to worship God and to him only serve. The Lord is jealous God. He is not to be trifled with. He has spoken concerning the manner in which he should be worshipped. He has hatred for idolatry, for its influence in corruption. It debases the mind and leads to sensuality and all kinds of sin. So already you see that commandment number 7, which talks about fornication. Although many times we limit it to literal action, having to commit fornication or adultery with somebody. Here we are told that it also links to spiritual fornication. So we may just think that I didn't do an act with a woman or a man, right? But maybe in our spiritual life, we are actually committing adultery. We have other gods. We have violated commandment 1 and 2. We have other gods before God. Yeah.
Let us go to commandment chapter 9, and we're reading from verse 16. And it reads as follows: You shall not steal. Let me read that again. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. What does the Bible say to liars and false witness?
All right, commandment number 9. It's very interesting. It talks about bearing false witness. I think many of us are guilty of that. Either we bear false witness because we are being bribed to testify wrongly or falsely, or we do it intentionally just to hurt the other person. Whichever way, God still says we shouldn't bear false witness. Have you ever wondered? No wonder in court of law, when they are prosecuting somebody, before they start, they do bring the Bible, right? They'll bring the Bible and they'll have you swear holding the Bible. Say you swear to tell nothing but the truth and the truth only, right? So this is how serious it gets, that even the ethnic courts, they believe in true witness. But now here we are told, God is saying you should not bear false witness against your neighbor or anyone else, because it hurts that person's reputation. You don't know the impact it will have on that. And do you know that God also puts a judgment on such kind of people who bears false witness? Because at the end of the day, by your false report, somebody's sentence, for example, let's say you have accused somebody to say they have raped you or they've stolen something from you, but they have not done it, and they get arrested and go and serve in prison for something which they did not do. So you've destroyed the whole life of that person. God says, for such people, they will not go unpunished. Now, according to Proverbs 19, verse 9, it says, false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall perish. So this is, it's very strong language. God is saying, for those that bear false witness, you may get away with it now. You may be able to, to live long and enjoy life, but one day you'll pay for that lie that you've told. Yeah.
So let us read verse 17, and this is commandment number 10. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Is it wrong to tell someone that you look good? Have I coveted?
Well, no. Remember, God is dealing with the motives.
Yes.
Right? Now, praising somebody is different from coveting somebody's property. Now, when you are just telling somebody, say, you look great. Have you coveted? No, you haven't coveted that person. But when you start thinking and say, wow, that person has a nice dress. Oh, I wish I could have it. And, you become troubled. You start, get disturbed that how much you wish to have that. You know that many people have become witchcraft. They've engaged in witchcraft because they wish to have what the other person is having. So they've become spiritualists because they don't feel good. The other person is driving that powerful, nice car, and they don't have it. So it starts with covetousness. I want to have what she has. In fact, we are also told that the great controversy, the war between good and evil, between Christ and Satan, it began when the devil wanted to have what Christ has. So it started with covetousness, also with pride. So the devil could not stand the fact that Christ is equal with God, right? And because of that, he wanted to have what Christ has. And so at the end of the day, we see that it led to so many trouble that he has to be kicked out of heaven. So and actually this is one of the one of the commandments that is less spoken of. You hardly hear people preaching about it. They say it is wrong. It appears like it's nothing, but most of the sins, they start by covetousness. We covet our neighbor's property, our neighbor's house, and that's why sometimes we end up in a lot of debts, because I want to be like so and so, and until I realize I have gone beyond my means because I wanted to be like that person. So it is wrong, and when if we don't ask God to help us to overcome such kind of sin, and we look at it as small sin, then it's gonna destroy us, because eventually it creates other problems in life as well. Yeah.
Okay. So my question to you is that were these commandments, or are these commandments only for the Jews?
Well, these commandments, they are not just for the Jews. Of course, many people today, they believe that these commandments, they were just for the Jews and they are not applicable to us. And they say, well, the time of the Jews is done. Now we are living in the New Testament. Now, let me tell you this. According to Matthew 5:17, Christ says, I have not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. And so, in other words, he came to expound, to help us understand more better about God's law rather than to destroy it. So the law of God was not just for the Jews. Now, John chapter 14, verse 15, we are told, Christ himself says, if you love me, keep my commandment, right? And we know if we love somebody, obviously you want to do what pleases them, right? So if we love Christ, we would really want to please him and to do what pleases him. So, and the other thing is looking at our time now, according to what the Bible tells us, according to Galatians chapter 3, verse 26 and 29. Now, we are children of Abraham, not by blood, but by faith. Now, Galatians 3, 26, 29 tells us that all those who live by faith in Christ are the heirs of Abraham. What do we have in common with Abraham? What we have in common with Abraham is that Abraham believed God. It was credited to him as righteousness. So when we have that faith that Abraham has, that Abraham had, and that is the faith in Christ, then we become children of Abraham, and we also become children of God. Not only that, we are told in James chapter 2, verse 10, right? We are saying, if you break one, you break all. So James is writing and saying, if you break one and you're thinking you're keeping the other one, you have broken all, because the same person that said, keep this and this and this. So you cannot pick up and say, I'm choosing this and I'm leaving that. And then lastly, we are told in Proverbs chapter 10, verse 16, that he that keepeth the law keepeth his own soul. So in other words, you see, the law, it is for our own good. No wonder when Christ summed it up for the gentleman who came and asked him, he said, what should I do to be saved? He said, love the Lord your God with all your might, your strength, and your mind. And then he says, love your neighbor as yourself. So the whole 10 commandments are summed up in those two. Why? No, it is simple, because the first one, the first 4, they are telling us of our duty to God. And the last 6, they are telling us of our duty to our fellow men. If you look at it closely, you realize that the last 6 speak about what you should and what you shouldn't do to your fellow men. And then the first 4 tells us what we should and what we shouldn't do to God. So at the end of the day, you see, no one says, love the Lord your God with all your might, with all your strength, with all your everything. Because it talks about our relationship with God. And the other one talks about our relationship with men. So for everyone that calls themselves to be Christian, or that seek to follow Christ, then we ought to do what Christ tells us to do. If we call ourselves Christian, and if we call ourselves, God's people. And no wonder, Jesus would tell the Pharisees in John chapter 8, verse 44 to say, you know what? You are doing what your father is doing, the devil. And he was talking to the Pharisees because they said, we are children of Abraham. But he says, but Abraham, whom you call your father, believed in God. And he did all that God commanded. But you are actually contrary to what Abraham was doing. So at the end of the day, these commandments, they were not just for the Jews. They are actually for God's people. And no wonder Revelation chapter 12, verse 17 says, he is the patience of the saints, of them that keep the commandment of God and have the testimony of Jesus. So God's people are to keep the commandment of God, because this is what maintains their relationship with him and also with their fellow men. Can you just imagine if everyone else was to live as they please, like, you just wake up one day and just drive anyhow. You just go and drive on the left side of the road, the other one on the right side of the road. You are all going in one direction. Everyone just doing as they please. There's no following the laws that when you reach at the stop sign, you stop. You will not last for 10 minutes. You would have been hit by a car, right? So the laws, they are not actually there to benefit God. They are actually to protect us. And all of us, we also do have laws in our house that governs us in order to have peace. If we don't
of the 10 Commandments. Sister Morgana, that will be all for us.
Thank you so much.